to this videos? If we make 5,000 likes to this video, we will upload more patriotic news. Thank you. Skip Bayless says black NFL players should refuse to play until Kaepernick is signed. The Kaepernick controversy is like the gift that keeps on giving. Now, Fox Sports' undisputed co-host Skip Bayless is saying black NFL players should refuse to play their first game until the embattled football player is signed. If the black players would unite, and say, "We will not play game 1 this year," Bayless said Tuesday, "I promise you, it would have an impact and would get something done." The former San Francisco 49ers quarterback hasn't received much interest from NFL teams in the months since he controversially took a knee during the national anthem in protest of perceived racial injustice in the United States. Kaepernick publicly opposed President Donald Trump and former Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton, too, because he didn't feel either candidate would be good for black Americans. Both are proven liars, and it almost seems like they're trying to debate who is less racist, he said of the Clinton-Trump presidential debates. And at this point, I was talking with one of my friends who goes, you have to pick the lesser of two evils, but in the end, it's still evil. Earlier in Tuesday's segment, sports journalist Rob Parker said, "Oftentimes, we hear about the pushback from NFL fans. It's about damn time the NFL recognizes that black people are fans of the game as well." He went on to note that black athletes make up about 70% of the players on the field, adding, "We count, too." Bayless agreed with Parker. Last week, Bayless and his co-host Shannon Sharpe talked about why, in their view, so many white people dislike Kaepernick. Bayless concluded that most people can't get past the fact that the NFL star disrespected the American flag. Most white people deep down know, Kaepernick is right, Bayless opined. The undisputed co-host's suggestion comes just days after the Miami Dolphins skipped over Kaepernick, signing recently retired Chicago Bears quarterback Jay Cutler, 34, to the team with a one-year, $10 million contract. The Baltimore Ravens were reportedly somewhat interested in Kaepernick, but his chances of a deal there seemingly went south after his girlfriend Nessa Diab suggested in a tweet that the NFL team's owner is racist. Her post likened Ravens owner Stephen Bisotti to a plantation owner and retired player Ray Lewis to a nun. After telling Trump FCKU, Jennifer Lawrence says country must move past divide and anger. Hollywood A-lister Jennifer Lawrence says the country must move past its political divide and anger, despite saying just last year that if she were ever to meet President Donald Trump, she would want to tell him, FCKU. In a cover story interview with Vogue published Wednesday, Lawrence said there needs to be a bridge between people who disagree on political issues. "We can't continue this divide and anger. There are issues affecting us as human beings, not as liberals and not as Republicans. We have to protect the foundation of this country, and acceptance," Lawrence told the magazine. "If you're preaching acceptance, accept immigrants, accept Muslims, accept everybody," she added. Lawrence's desire for reconciliation between political foes, however, appears to be far from the position she took toward Donald Trump and his supporters before and after the presidential election. "If Donald Trump becomes president, that will be the end of the world," the Hunger Games star said in 2015 at a promotional press junket. During an appearance last May on The Graham Norton Show, Lawrence recalled how she once attended a concert at which the Republican presidential frontrunner was also present. "I was at a concert that I heard he was attending, so I had my full security. I was like, find Donald Trump," Lawrence explained. "Because I was adamant on finding him and then making a video of me going, 'Hey Trump, FCKU.'" In the wake of Trump's historic presidential election win, Lawrence wrote a post-election message to women published by Vice website Broadly in which she urged Clinton supporters to let Trump's victory enrage them. "Do not let this defeat you, let this enrage you. Let it motivate you. Let this be the fire you didn't have before. If you are an immigrant, if you are a person of color, if you are LGBTQ+, if you are a woman, don't be afraid, be loud," she wrote at the time. Democrats threaten gov shutdown to block border wall. Democrats are threatening to shutter many government agencies on October 1st unless President Donald Trump gives up his popular campaign promise to build the border wall against Mexico, according to Politico. In response, Trump's deputies are offering political compromises to Democrats, including a rise in domestic spending, says Politico. The White House is pushing a deal on Capitol Hill to head off a government shutdown that would lift strict spending caps long opposed by Democrats in exchange for money for President Donald Trump's border wall with Mexico, multiple sources said. Mark Short, the White House's Director of Legislative Affairs, met with top staffers from both parties on the Senate Appropriations Committee last week to make a hard sell for the proposal, the sources said. Short, who said the border funding would be used for a double fence, stressed that the White House is insisting on a down payment for construction this fall. Short also lobbied for a big budget increase for the Pentagon, another priority for Trump. If Democrats block the spending plan, many government agencies will have to send their employees home. But national security agencies, and various aid programs, such as the Social Security program, would keep operating. Trump's pending request for an October funding package of $1.6 billion would help build roughly 62 miles of border wall. In May, Democrats, aided by a passive GOP leadership, blocked a 2017 funding package that would have helped quickly build 42 miles of wall. Led by Senator Chuck Schumer, Democrats are hoping to block any wall construction, so protecting the northward flow of government-dependent workers to Democratic-run cities, and also breaking Trump's 2016 primary campaign promise. But Democratic politicians are also being squeezed between their radical base and popular opinion, which favors Trump's immigration reform plans. For example, Politico reported that Senator Tammy Baldwin is opposing the border fence. I do know for a fact that every Democrat considers wall funding to be a poison pill, she told Politico. But a recent poll shows that Trump's immigration reform gets overwhelming support in Wisconsin, where Baldwin must face the voters in 2018. The June poll of 1,000 likely midterm voters was conducted for Numbers USA, which favors Trump's merit immigration reform. For example, the poll asked, "Do you strongly support, somewhat oppose or strongly oppose setting up rules to ensure that businesses give first preference for jobs to American workers and legal immigrants already in this country before businesses can ask for new immigrant workers?" The proposal won 53% strong support, and only 6% strong opposition, said Numbers USA. The Numbers USA group also polled in Montana, where Democratic Senator Jon Tester is also up for election in 2018. He suggested to Politico that he could support Trump's double-layer fence, saying, "There are places where the wall makes sense, and there are places where the wall doesn't make sense, and there are better options. I'll just take a look at it and see." 8 additional Democratic senators are up for election in 2018 in states where Trump won. In 2014, Schumer and Democrats lost 10 Senate seats after trying to push through the so-called Gang of 8 cheap labor and amnesty bill. Under pre-Trump policies, the federal government annually imports 1 million legal immigrants into the United States, just as 4 million young Americans turn 18. The federal government also awards roughly 1.5 million temporary work permits to foreigners, grants temporary work visas to roughly 500,000 new contract workers, such as H-1B workers, and also largely ignores the resident population of 8 million employed illegal immigrants. The current annual flood of foreign labor spikes profits and Wall Street values by cutting salaries for manual and skilled labor offered by blue-collar and white-collar employees. It also drives up real estate prices, widens wealth gaps, reduces high-tech investment, increases state and local tax burdens, hurts kids' schools and college education, and sidelines at least 5 million marginalized Americans and their families. Secret Service agent Maxine Waters is a fraud, and I'll prove it to you. During her recent appearance on The View, U.S. Representative Maxine Waters, D. California, suggested that the leaks from the White House are good for Americans, reports Fox News. She advocated for the efforts of moles in the White House and voiced her desire to see the president impeached. According to the Gateway pundit, Dan Bongino, a former Secret Service agent, appeared on Fox and Friends to call Waters a fraud and declared, "I can prove it to you." Waters' appearance on The View was filled with controversial statements and calls to action that bordered on treason, as Fox News reported. When co-host Paul Ferris asked if she was upset by the leak of the phone call between President Trump and President Nieto of Mexico, Waters said, "No, not at all, I am so glad they're telling us what's going on." When the co-host tried to point out that such a phone call was confidential, Waters waved it off, saying, "I need to hear these conversations." Another co-host, Jebby Diabila, tried to explain that the leaks could be dangerous as it could become the norm for later presidents and hurt diplomatic ties. However, Waters was adamant that it was all for the best. Responding to the concern for national security and diplomatic relations, she said it wouldn't happen again because it's this president that some people have no confidence in. They're undermining him because they want to see him stopped. They want us to do something. Not every president would be treated this way. She claims the leaks are because Trump has no values. He lies. They know it. And he's the danger. And they want us to do something about it. Contrasting Waters' praise, Bongino was quick to criticize the leakers on Fox and Friends. "This is illegal, fraudulent activity from a bunch of fakes inside the government who don't have the guts to go on the record and actually face the consequences for their illegal actions." He went on to demonstrate how Waters is a fraud. Maxine Waters swore to uphold the Constitution of the United States. She's then suggesting on a national television show that people should violate the law, violate the Constitution of the United States and break the law, to destroy our efforts in international diplomacy, to advance her sick political agenda for impeachment for a crime that doesn't exist. In his words, Waters' actions constitute a violation of her oath as a U.S. representative. He said that is the definition of insanity. Yet Waters' encouragement of leaks and treasonous behavior isn't that surprising to some. According to the Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, CREW, Waters is considered one of the most corrupt members of Congress. This label was given to Waters after her exploitation of her position as a senior member of Congress for her own financial gain during the recession. This was according to CREW Executive Director Melanie Sloan, who said, by contacting then Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson to request a meeting, allegedly for a group of minority-owned banks, but then arranging for only one bank, One United, in which she had a financial interest, to attend, Representative Waters violated House conflict of interest rules. Politicians need to be held accountable for violating their oaths and advocating the leaking of confidential documents that could damage diplomatic ties and expose our national security. There is no justification for such behavior, regardless of their personal feelings towards the president. Mexico drops shocking threat, Americans entering Mexico will have to. Mexico is finally realizing it's going to have to pay for the border wall, and you'll never guess what she's doing in retaliation. There's a couple of good guesses. If you thought, stop cooperating with Homeland Security, you're pretty close. After all, if we lost track of all those cartel hitmen, we'd be in serious trouble. But that idea has already been used as a threat, and Trump didn't blink. And in desperation, it's clear the Mexican government is threatening Trump with the one thing they think will make him back down: money. Specifically, fees for entering the country. Especially from Americans. Fox News reports, a top Mexican official on Tuesday said that Mexico may consider charging a fee for Americans entering the country in what could be seen as a retaliation to President Trump's call for a border wall. Foreign Secretary Luis Videgaray, in response to the border wall, called on his colleagues to consider the entry fee. We could explore, not necessarily a visa, that could impede a lot of people from coming to Mexico, but we could perhaps have a fee associated with entry, Videgaray said. Now, a fee to enter Mexico isn't going to hurt much of America. Although college students looking for cheap tequila will suffer during spring break. And bargain shoppers from Texas might be disappointed that the Mexican barter market isn't so cheap anymore. But overall, a fee for entering Mexico won't do anything at all to the US, except perhaps make most of us laugh. Because most of us aren't going to Mexico, and wouldn't even be going if we were charged a fee. The threat of an absurd entry fee wasn't the only threat that Videgaray and the Mexican government offered, however. Videgaray went on to say that if talks between the US and Mexico fail to satisfy both countries, the Mexican government would consider reducing security cooperation. If the negotiation on other themes, immigration, the border, trade, isn't satisfactory to Mexico's interests, we will have to review our existing cooperation in the security areas and that involves the National Immigration Agency, the federal police and of course, the armed forces. To be clear, all those things at the end, the police, armed forces, and immigration agency, are pretty vital when it comes to fighting drugs. It's not that we couldn't do it on our own. It's that it would take a while to get the process going smoothly. Which means that Mexico is threatening to send us more criminals if we build a wall. Comments Mexico is finally realizing it's going to have to pay for the border wall, and you'll never guess what she's doing in retaliation. There's a couple of good guesses. If you thought, stop cooperating with Homeland Security, you're pretty close. After all, if we lost track of all those cartel hitmen, we'd be in serious trouble. But that idea has already been used as a threat, and Trump didn't blink. And in desperation, it's clear the Mexican government is threatening Trump with the one thing they think will make him back down: money. Specifically, fees for entering the country. Especially from Americans. Fox News reports, a top Mexican official on Tuesday said that Mexico may consider charging a fee for Americans entering the country in what could be seen as a retaliation to President Trump's call for a border wall. Foreign Secretary Luis Videgaray, in response to the border wall, called on his colleagues to consider the entry fee. We could explore, not necessarily a visa, that could impede a lot of people from coming to Mexico, but we could perhaps have a fee associated with entry, Videgaray said. Now, a fee to enter Mexico isn't going to hurt much of America. Although college students looking for cheap tequila will suffer during spring break. And bargain shoppers from Texas might be disappointed that the Mexican barter market isn't so cheap anymore. But overall, a fee for entering Mexico won't do anything at all to the US, except perhaps make most of us laugh. Because most of us aren't going to Mexico, and wouldn't even be going if we were charged a fee. The threat of an absurd entry fee wasn't the only threat that Videgaray and the Mexican government offered, however. Videgaray went on to say that if talks between the US and Mexico fail to satisfy both countries, the Mexican government would consider reducing security cooperation. If the negotiation on other themes, immigration, the border, trade, isn't satisfactory to Mexico's interests, we will have to review our existing cooperation in the security areas and that involves the National Immigration Agency, the federal police and of course, the armed forces. To be clear, all those things at the end, the police, armed forces, and immigration agency, are pretty vital when it comes to fighting drugs. It's not that we couldn't do it on our own. It's that it would take a while to get the process going smoothly. Which means that Mexico is threatening to send us more criminals if we build a wall. It's ironic enough that Mexico is charging us money to enter their country, money which would, in the end, only pay for a wall. It's even more ironic that the wall we're building might protect us against Mexico's retaliation for that very